Thanks for joining us for this edition of France in Focus. Visitors to the French capital quickly familiarise themselves with the geography of the city. It's quite straightforward, 20 districts or arrondissements on either side of the River Seine. And you'd have thought that given the confines of the city, namely the ring road which encircles it, that there's little scope for enlarging the French capital. Well, there is, and it's called Grand Paris. Well, it is a huge project which aims to interconnect Paris and the surrounding areas. And part of that is happening here. They're extending one of the metro lines. But let's start by taking a look at a few facts and figures.
With more than 12 million residents spread over 12,000 square kilometers, Île-de-France is the most densely populated region in the country. It was this demographic concentration that 10 years ago pushed then-President Nicolas Sarkozy to launch Grand Paris, an ambitious project to transform the capital and its surrounding suburbs into a better connected metropolis. The Grand Paris Express project will oversee the construction of 200 kilometers of railway tracks, 90% of which will be underground, doubling the current length of the metro. 4 new metro lines will be created and 2 more will be extended to spare suburbanites unnecessary trips to Paris and reduce their daily commute. All this and 68 new stations will gradually come into service from 2019 to 2030. 55 housing sites covering 90 hectares will also be set up nearby. Overall, Grand Paris will create more than 14,000 new homes, offices and recreational areas, with 8 hectares reserved for urban farming. But Grand Paris will also mean new governance, which is where things get complicated. The metropolis of Grand Paris will unite the capital with 130 communes. This new entity will replace the network of communes that existed before. But it's easier said than done, because the new metropolis will itself be divided into 12 territories, adding to the communes and departments already in the region. A far from simple task that will no doubt create a bureaucratic headache.
Well, to tell us more about the extension of the Paris transport network, I'm joined now by one of the engineers working on the extension of Line 4, Simon de Boisson. Hi, Simon.
Bonjour.
You're working on the extension of this metro line. Just tell us a little bit about what's happening around us here.
What we're doing is extending the current line so it reaches about 1.5 kilometers into the Paris suburbs at the south end of the line to Bagneux.
This is a huge tunnel. How do you go about constructing something on this scale?
For this tunnel in particular, we're using a traditional method. So we have some big gear down there. We can dig up to 2 meters a day. And at the end of each digging phase, we need to put in a temporary support before we can move forward.
And I imagine something like this is not without its challenges. Just tell me a little bit about some of them.
One of our first challenges with this project was dealing with the underground limestone. A lot of it was 35 meters deep. Before we could get going on extending the line, we had to take out each block of limestone and have it refilled.
Okay, Simon de Boisson, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Well, as we've been hearing, the Grand Paris project is going to touch the lives of millions of people in and around the French capital. And in theory, it's going to make life easier with public transport being made more efficient, like what's happening around me here, deep underground. But a project on this scale was never going to be without its critics, with those opposed to it saying it's too ambitious, too expensive, and altogether unrealistic.
Construction is underway for Le Grand Paris. 200 kilometers of new metro line with a 2030 deadline. It's an ambitious project with a hefty price tag. The estimated cost shot from 26 to 38.5 billion euros, and work delays keep building up. The government has even had to call time on certain portions of the line. By 2027, for example, Line 18 will run from Orly to Saclay and Saint-Aubin, but the extension to Versailles will only be effective from 2030. Meanwhile, it's hoped the portion of Line 17 between Saint-Denis and Bourget will be ready in time for the 2024 Olympics. But the link to the airport Roissy-Charles de Gaulle will have to wait until 2030.
These lines will be useful to the public, and the work has already started. Admittedly, the initial dates we announced were ambitious. We'd assumed that everything would work smoothly. and that there wouldn't be any obstacles. But there are always some, and we've just done a reassessment that takes these changes into account and allows us to forecast dates that are more in step with reality.
So a bit of the pressure has been taken off, but some officials still have concerns.
It's unacceptable. It's a poor investment by the state. They should be reducing both the social and government debt, as well as taking up the environmental challenge.
We know full well that there are loads of promises and projects, but there simply isn't enough money.
The project presents huge technical challenges too. No city in the world has ever managed to dig 12 kilometers of tunnel in a single year. 200 kilometers of tunneling should in theory take nearly 17 years, meaning a completion date of 2032. What's more, the landscape in Paris's suburbs will completely change, with plans for new homes and future businesses popping up around the new line.
It's normal for there to be fears. We can't build on 17 hectares of land without worrying residents. Our role is to respond to their concerns.
Most projects have won a general consensus, with one exception. Plans for Europa City, a gigantic leisure centre in the town of Gonesse, complete with ski slopes, an aquatic centre and a theatre. A huge project costing €3 billion in private funding and expected to create 10,000 jobs. For the town mayor, it's a no-brainer. But its opponents say this project would not only harm the environment, but would stick out like a sore thumb.
This project might make sense in Dubai or elsewhere, but here, in an area with lots of other things on offer on a cultural level, we don't understand the meaning of it at all.
The group have already won their first victory after an administrative tribunal rules the project should be suspended for not respecting the environment. Europa City supporters have appealed to the state. They must now wait until the end of March to learn the outcome.
Well, as we saw in that report, there's quite a bit of controversy surrounding this Grand Paris project. And to tell us more, I'm joined now by author, urbanist and expert on this topic, Professor Frederick Gini. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Let me start by asking you, how is this going to change the character of Paris?
When we think of Paris, we think of Paris intramuros. We think of the Haussmannian buildings. But today, Paris has become something else. We're no longer a city of 2 million. Today we're a city of 12 million people. Paris means La Défense, it means Disneyland, it means Charles de Gaulle Airport. Hundreds and hundreds, actually, millions of companies are based outside of Paris, and 30% of Parisians commute to the suburbs today. 70% of them shop in the suburbs, and every morning there are millions of people who cross the city, starting from the suburbs where they live, to the suburbs where they work. Today the challenge is to successfully integrate Paris with its surrounding suburbs. Paris could use more inspiration from the suburbs and vice versa. Everyone will have a much better lifestyle and it'll create jobs in these areas. Not having public transportation has made it difficult for people to live in these areas, meaning the job market doesn't work as well as it could. It clogs growth within the Paris region.
In your opinion, is the approach being taken by the authorities the right approach, and as far as the Grand Paris project is concerned?
Starting in the 2000s, we realized that the Greater Paris region wasn't developing and growing the way it could be. There's been a lack of investment in transport, but also a lack of political incentive to make changes. This can't happen anymore. Local elected representatives, that's 1,200 mayors in the Paris region, need to work better together.
And do you think that the fact that Paris is going to host the Olympics in the year 2024 has been a catalyst in speeding up this whole project?
This is a chance to change people's perceptions. By 2024, we'll have lengthened the subways, we'll have transformed the local governments of this region, and it'll be an opportunity for everyone, Parisians, suburbanites, French, Europeans, the whole world, to realize that Paris is bigger than Paris.
What do you think it's going to bring to Paris in terms of job creation? Do you think it's going to boost the economy, create new jobs perhaps as a project?
The labour market isn't functioning as well as it could. The metro and other transport lines in general are too concentrated on Paris, and that poses a problem for the ratio of employment to housing opportunities in any given area. By extending the metro to the suburbs, we're facilitating their integration into the labour market. In theory, this should create jobs, promote activities and allow businesses to work better alongside one another.
For years we've talked about Greater London. Is that a sort of comparable model for the Greater Paris project?
The historic relationship between Paris and London in this context is actually quite interesting. Paris invested a lot in transport in the 70s, and then London started investing at the start of the 90s, at a time when Paris was starting to slow down. With the Olympics in 2012, there was this whole Thames Gateway expansion, and I'd say we're now starting to see things turn the other way again. With Brexit, London's real estate market is struggling. The city's entering a difficult phase. Paris, on the other hand, is waking up by investing in transport, overseeing more construction than ever. 30% of Paris is made up of social housing. In the Greater Paris region, you have more social housing than in any other Western metropolis. It's a strategic challenge today because all major cities are asking where their key workers should live and where they should work. It's a question that Paris has been thinking about for a while. But London seems behind, so I'd say the two cities have been kind of playing a game of cat and mouse since the 40s, and it will probably continue this way.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us, Professor Frederick Gini. Thank you so much. Well, this is where we leave you for this week's edition of France in Focus in Champigny-sur-Marne, where, as you can see behind me, one of the metro stations of the Grand Paris project is currently under construction. Let's not forget, this is the largest construction site in the whole of Europe, 4 times the size of the Channel Tunnel. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned.